You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to another Colts Blue Zone podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Our offseason Colts position-by-position breakdown continues with the offensive line this week, which is not the most sexy position to talk about. Like, we've done quarterback, we've done wide receiver, we've done defensive end, but by golly, if we have not seen recently that it is of crucial importance to...
It destroyed last season.
Exactly. And I will make some of the argument that beyond the problem has gone beyond one season, and we'll discuss that too. But...
You know, it may tell us how great Jonathan Taylor's season was 2 years ago.
Exactly. It certainly will. And it'll also highlight some differences in blocking. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We begin with the news. And there is a plethora, a cornucopia, if you will,
I've
of
always
news.
tried to stay away from the word plethora. I don't know why. I don't know.
I like it.
People used to make fun of it. Plethora.
My fifth grade teacher always said that. We have a plethora, a cornucopia of whatever to get through today. So it's always stuck in my head that those two words go together.
A bunch of stuff.
We have a bunch of stuff to get to today, starting with the Colts coaching staff taking shape. And that begins with Jim Bob Cooter. The 38-year-old Joe loves it to be hired as offensive coordinator. Joe just loves it so he can say Jim Bob Cooter.
It's the best name in football.
It is.
Could you have named, with your last name Cooter, is there anything else you could have named him?
It's fitting. You know, the first name and the last name have to be, in unison. They got to match.
It's just going to be strange when we get coordinators when you say, it used to be, hey, Nick, or hey, Jim Bob.
I wonder if his name is actually James Robert. Or if
I believe it
actually
is.
Jim. Okay.
I believe it is.
Okay, cool. That's great. I was like, it could have just been Jim Bob for all I know, but
He should be working like at Chunky Cheese or whatever it is.
Right.
Jim Bob Cooter.
There's old Jim Bob. He's over trying to fix the
Bait and
fix
tackle
the ticket
shop somewhere.
Or NASCAR.
There you go.
Yeah, any of these things. But nope, he's an NFL offensive mind, and one that's pretty respected at that has been the passing game coordinator with Jacksonville last year. We all saw that worked out pretty good under Doug Peterson, and sure taught Trevor Lawrence how to actually be an NFL quarterback, unlike what happened under the Urban Meyer staff the year before.
What a train wreck.
we keep having excuses to bring that up, and that's only because we're discussing an AFC South team, it seems like. But with this connection, it gives us another one. In 2021, he was a consultant with the Philadelphia Eagles, and while there, worked with Shane Steichen, of course, and under Nick Sirianni's staff. Before that was the New York Jets running back coach, and perhaps known to most people across the NFL-wise as being the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator in 2016 through 2018. Kind of made a small name for himself there. He was mentioned a couple times here and there with some head coaching searches. I don't know if he had any interviews back then, Joe, but that's when he kind of burst onto the quote-unquote national scene.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically if anyone interviewed him either, but I do know his name was tossed around out there because of the job that he did with Matthew Stafford and those young receivers.
Right. Quarterbacks coach for Detroit before that, and before that, Colts fans might remember the name as being an assistant on Jim Caldwell's staff from 2009 to 2011. So, Chappa, do you have any memories yourself of Jim Bob Cooter here, or was he a guy who kind of faded into the background a little bit, not quite as high profile as some of the coordinators and all that you talk to on a more regular basis?
Yeah, not really, because he was an assistant. And, the thing that's important from that time, though, is he was around Peyton Manning. And if you're an offensive assistant, you have some influence, input, whatever the term is. So that's only good things. And although that 2011, he also saw how you scrambled with Kerry Collins and Curtis Painter and Dan Orlovsky. So this guy's been around, and we've said in my mind the three most important offseason hires without question were head coach, coordinator, and then come April. And they've got a mesh, and these two guys, Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter, are going to have major influence on who it is, and how it's going to be going forward.
And if those are the three, quarterbacks coach is probably the next one at number 4, and you can argue that one might be up a little bit higher too if he's talking with the quarterback a little bit more often. But the quarterbacks he's worked with, we've mentioned Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford. Obviously, he was with the Eagles 2 years ago, so that includes Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he was with Trevor Lawrence last year. So those are kind of some of the names that are thrown out there that Jim Bob Cooter has coached before in his career. he'll add another one with the Colts this year to his list.
One thing, because people say, well, it really, Jacksonville took off with Doug Peterson, which they did.
Yes,
but
that's not wrong.
When you're the passing game coordinator, you're with the quarterbacks every day. You're with them in every practice. So let's not just say, well, that was Doug Peterson. No, Jim Bob Cooter had a big influence as well, and we saw the incredible improvement Trevor Lawrence from rookie year to year 2.
Undoubtedly, undeniably, for sure. So the hope is that whoever the Colts bring in can get some of that juice as well and improve from his college career to year 1 to year 2 and beyond under this coaching staff. Tom Manning has been hired to be the tight ends coach per a couple national reports for the Colts. And if that name is familiar to you, it's because he coached the Colts tight ends in 2018 as well. And that was a pretty good year for Colts tight ends because Eric Ebron was here and caught like 20 touchdowns and had a tremendous season catching balls from Andrew Luck. Jack Doyle was also in that group. So there was pretty good talent among the Colts tight ends in that group. Nevertheless, Manning left the Colts to be Iowa State's offensive coordinator. And now he's back here to the NFL to be tight ends coach again. Chap, you can't deny what success they had back then, but you also can't deny that the Colts don't have the same tight end room right now that they had back then either.
Mo Ali Cox, he's the last holdover. So, and again, it's always hard to know how much when one position group excels or doesn't, how much that coach. But again, that coach is in that room every day. He has influence all the time. He got absolutely the best seat. We saw the Eric Ebron era. We did.
Every bit of it.
Every bit of it. and again, let's keep in mind that he had Andrew Luck thrown to him.
Exactly.
So, and that was Luck's comeback player of the year.
It was, yes.
So
his best season of his career.
But still, let's not diminish the importance of that. And we'll see later on in the staff with, I think Reggie Wayne comes back. And I think he had a great influence on that group last year. So, yeah, we focus on the head coach and the coordinators, but these position guys, they're with these players every day. So they've got a major impact with them.
Chap kind of Joe sneaking in a little news there. He thinks Reggie Wayne's coming back to the Colts coaching staff this year. At this point, we expect to hear the entire staff probably released in the next couple of days, if not the next week before the combine really takes place, because you got to have everybody by then. And we haven't heard anything one way or the other for Reggie Wayne, so he's not tweeting from the beach at least right now. So maybe he's getting to work.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it was encouraging to see guys like Alec Pierce be able to go out there and make an immediate impact. Paris Campbell finally be healthy and be a contributor to the offense. And then Michael Pittman Jr., who, has the talent, kind of wasn't able to show his full ability this past season, but was a consistent, reliable wide receiver for them.
DeAndre Smith will also join Shane Steichen's staff here in Indianapolis, according to the New York Daily News. He was with the Giants last year as running back coach. They haven't specified. The report didn't specify where he would be this year, but I do know Scotty Montgomery, the Colts' former running back coach, is a former running back coach here. So that is a position that is open up. And if he wanted to leave the Giants for whatever reason, well, there he is, and the Giants let him go. So it looks like DeAndre Smith might fill in that same role here. Offensive line coach, which is where we'll spend the majority of our day today discussing, Chris Strasser is going to the Houston Texans. He had coached the offensive line here in Indianapolis since 2019. Really had been raked over the coals a little bit.
I was going to say, be careful.
Yeah, for what happened last year in particular, and was kept on last year when other people like Frank Reich was fired and Marcus Brady was fired. It was plain to see, Chap, that the offensive line was the primary issue, or at least causing other problems. You could clearly see the issues with the offensive line. But Strasser maintained his job throughout the year, but he's going to go to the Texans and try to fix their offensive line now.
Yeah, I mean, and you alluded to earlier, this has been a gradual regression of this group. And we just keep in mind, and we harp on it maybe too much, but this is the highest paid line in the league. At least last year it was. And it probably will be this year as well. All three of those mainstays sort of regressed. I thought, we won't get into too much right here, but Braden Smith, I thought, was the only one that really got his game together. I guess he and Quentin did. But most of us expected Chris Strasser to be replaced. And, that's another one of the key guys they've got to get in place as the offensive line coach. I go back in the day with the Colts when they were really, really good, and of course they had really, really good players, but they had a coaching staff that stayed intact. And Howard Mudd was one of those guys that was here for a long time. And if I'm not mistaken, if I remember right, Howard's the one that really suggested Strasser to Frank Reich at the time to bring him here. So it's time for a change, and we'll see who that new guy is.
And there might be a change also at special teams coordinator, as Bubba Ventrone has been reportedly interviewing with the Cleveland Browns today, Wednesday, as we tape this podcast. The Colts, according to the report, are, quote, working through it, end quote, which could mean a variety of things. But I was discussing with Chap this earlier, Joe, that if it's just a lateral move, that the Colts can technically block it, but there's also no sense in keeping a coach on your staff who doesn't want to be here. And the Colts bypassed Bubba Ventrone last year for the interim head coach position, gave it to Jeff Saturday. And even though Bubba was at the opening press conference for Shane Steichen, kind of a show of support, at least in my mind, it looks like, still I wouldn't be surprised if there are still some quote unquote hurt feelings there for him being passed over for a job that I think many of us in the media expected to be his once Frank Reich was fired immediately.
And it's a weird situation because if you did make him interim head coach, it'd be kind of awkward to then put him back at special teams coach and bring in Steichen. So he was the decision was either to make him your probably long-term head coach, or he was going to leave regardless. I hope he stays. He's done a terrific job with this special teams, returns, blocking punts. I mean, how many times in 2021 did that make a major difference in the ball game, the special teams coverage? But I also think that he wants to be a head coach. That's on his list of goals. And if he thinks he has a better chance of getting there by joining the Cleveland Browns than the Indianapolis Colts, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, Chap, we talked about just the idea of changing from one team to another and what the Colts could block it. But like I said, if a coach doesn't want to be here, then why would you keep him?
Yeah, I was told yesterday they were trying to work through it. And what I thought that meant was they're trying to talk him into staying.
Right.
I don't think they were ever going to block him. I think they wanted, before they granted, Cleveland permission, they wanted to talk to Bubba and say, what can we do, to
keep you here?
To keep you here. Now, whether that's more money, we were talking, I don't know that making him an assistant head coach, I don't know if that really works that much for the coordinator. But if he wants to leave and he thinks there's a better chance somewhere else, then you do it. You just let him do it, and you let him out of his contract. And the fact that Cleveland fired their special teams coach and then they immediately requested to talk to Bubba, you only did it for one reason. You want him.
Yeah, so you can read the tea leaves that they had. This was planned. This was not like, we just fired a special teams coordinator. Who could it be out there?
This is connected dots. And tonight or tomorrow, we're going to see that he's signing with Cleveland, which is, he played, was it 3 or 4 years?
Yep.
And great guy. I never really thought he was going to be a serious candidate here for head coach, although he was like the first guy they interviewed. But he wants to be head coach, and he's got that interaction with players, the way he works with them. And at some point, he will be that next coordinator, the John Harbaugh type, to get a job, and good for Bubba. But they will miss him. This will be a major loss. Again, special teams. Look at what he's had to deal with errant kickers, and you lose your punter. And he's had a couple of All-Pro guys with, was it George Odom and Ashton Doolin? And Luke Rhodes has as a long snapper, has either been All-Pro or Pro Bowl.
One of the two, I forget. I thought it was
great group. He's had a great influence. This is not a small loss if it happens.
Yeah, and as we've said on this podcast before, there's probably few guys, coaches who know the full roster better than Bubba Ventrone right now. So if he leaves, it's not like one guy's in the room who can really kind of direct the conversation about 1 through 53 or 1 through 90, I guess, as it goes by with what's it called, practice squad and all that, and people you bring in. But it's going to be the new staff making their own opinions and their own judgments, which can be good in its own right, and then moving on from there.
We talked about last week that the one good thing, this was last week, with Shane Steichen taking over, as well as at least he's got his defensive coordinator with Gus Bradley, which we assume we've not heard.
Haven't heard anything otherwise. Haven't heard anybody being interviewed.
And Bubba being back, because then that lets him focus on offense. Well, now, if Bubba leaves, then he's got to all of a sudden put his focus somewhere else, which is not a good thing. But like you mentioned, you get the combine coming up, and you want your coaching staff in place so that they can do their own little areas with these players. So I think by Thursday or Friday we're going to find out who the coaching staff is. But again, I'll just harp on it one more time. Losing Bubba will be a big loss.
A pair of roster moves to get to. One of them from the Colts, signing cornerback Kevin Tolliver, has spent 3 seasons playing in the NFL with the Chicago Bears coming out of college, and then Denver for 1 year. That was back in 2020. He hasn't played a down in the league over the past 2 years. Was on the Baltimore Ravens practice squad. We were talking before the show. He's a former top 10 overall recruit in the 2015 class. Went to LSU as a cornerback. So if any of you are big SEC football fans, you might remember the name. But left LSU after his 3rd year there and was undrafted coming out. So not the best decision from him back then to try to test the NFL waters. Didn't have the best career at LSU. Had one decent season. And I was like, I'm going to the NFL. And I was like, well, how ready are you? And he's been very much muddling in the NFL waters ever since. So this is not a major signing. It's a guy that at one time had a tremendous amount of potential, but now he's just a guy who has a little bit of NFL experience that the Colts are bringing in to put on the roster right now. And also the second bit of roster move is that just came down maybe an hour or two before we're taping this today, is that the Titans have released a couple players, wide receiver Robert Woods, kicker Randy Bullock, and perhaps most notably left tackle Taylor Lewan, who's a 3-time Pro Bowler. And that saves the Titans about $27 million in cap space, which they were in desperate need of saving at the time. But Joe, we're going to get into like some offensive linemen, and now Taylor Lewan's going to be a free agent as well. But he's a guy who's had success in the past, hasn't had the most recent at the pinnacle, at the top level success, but was a consistent left tackle on the Titans for a good number of years. So some injuries have kind of derailed him the past few years, but there's a familiar face that will not be on an opposing sideline for the Colts, at least not with the Titans next year at least.
And that's really the thing. I know the Titans needed to get back under the salary cap, but if Lewan was healthy and hadn't been derailed by injuries the past several years, you pay your left tackle and you find someone else to cut. So that's what's difficult. I know Lewan said he's considering retirement, so we'll see if he ends up signing with another team or not. He's got his Bussin' with the Boys podcast that he likes to do. He's got other things going on in his life. He's gone through so many injuries, so I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to hang it up.
Yep, likewise. So best of luck to Taylor in his decision in the future. And so those are the major roster moves. The franchise tag window has opened on Tuesday. The Colts could franchise tag someone, but as we all agreed before the podcast, they're not likely to do so. You would think if a gun to your head you had to, it would be Chase McLaughlin, because he'd be the cheapest. He's a free agent. You can get him for 1 year, and you want to bring him back.
Franchise tag for a kicker is 5.39.
Yeah.
And if you transition him, it's 4.8, which that's cheaper than a contract, but that's just with a gun to our head. Exactly.
That's the only reason why the Colts would do it. They haven't used the franchise tag since 2013 with Pat McAfee.
With a punter.
Yes, indeed. There is the possibility for a franchise tag next year if you don't get a deal done with Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor. That's next year, though, and that has to have a lot of dominoes fall before then. In the right or the wrong way, as the case may be. So we might have to worry about that next year, chap.
Well, and we'll do a podcast on this at some point, but this year, let's say this year is the year that you had to do it. Franchise for a running back is $10 million. Franchise for a receiver is 19.7.
Yep.
That's only going to go up next year.
Yep.
So that's what the franchise tag does. It lets you kick the can down the road, I guess.
Well, the Colts are experts at kicking the can down the road at quarterback the last couple of years.
How'd that work out? You got sore feet and a dented can, and you're still in the same place.
Yep.
No, you're actually further. You've retreated
behind.
You've regressed. So yeah, there are several teams prominent that will deal with this franchise tag. The Giants, Baltimore. They were throwing this out on TV today. That let's say Baltimore uses the franchise tag on Lamar Jackson, which that allows them to go elsewhere and get a contract. Would you give 2 first-round draft picks for Lamar Jackson, also knowing that you've got to do the contract or not?
It's such a great question because he's been hobbled by injuries the last 2 years. It depends on what the contract is and how much guaranteed money's in it, I think. But which is going to be oodles and oodles.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson.
Just start there. I mean,
because he's an MVP.
If I'm the Colts, if you're saying you as in the Indianapolis Colts, no, I'm not doing it. I think between the contract and the lack of draft picks, and I think you have to consider more than most quarterbacks his age and injury history because of how much he runs and how he wins football games. Normal quarterbacks, you can play till you're 35 easy. Quarterbacks who run as much
Cam Newton.
Cam Newton fell off a cliff really, really fast once that athletic ability went away. So I would not do it if I was the Colts. Maybe if I was another team it's hard to come up with one off the top of my head, but a team that might be closer to winning a championship right away.
Maybe if you had 3 first-round draft picks over the next 2 years, like if you made some trades to do that, and so you still have one, and you have to give away 2 others, like if you're Houston, if you're Seattle, like maybe you consider that. But I don't know, man.
The Colts just need to suck it up, and I don't want to say go young because they got some pretty good veteran talent along with Taylor and Pittman. But at that position, you've got to go young and build around that young kid and use that rookie contract for 4 years and really make hay with that rookie contract.
The Combine begins next week, as Chap alluded to just a few minutes ago. Players will report on Sunday. Workouts measurements begin on Thursday. I think the quarterbacks are kind of on display, quote unquote, there on Saturday and Sunday, whether it's out there on the field one of those 2 days. So we got a week and a half really until the big show comes to the turf at Lucas Oil Stadium. But Joe loves himself some underwear Olympics. Chap has seen it in the best days and the leanest
days of my life down at the convention center, so I'll be there as little as possible.
Yep, I'll be there because GMs and head coaches talk there, so we'll get a chance to do that with a couple of the Colts decision makers. But Joe, I'd imagine that you are. You can hardly sleep at night knowing that the players are reporting in less than a week.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Specifically, I'll be looking at quarterbacks this year, which normally is a position I don't pay that much attention to. But with the Colts in the thick of it in terms of drafting a quarterback up top, how big is Bryce Young? That's kind of the huge question this year. How is he 6 foot? Is he 5'9"? Is he going to be 180? Is he going to be 200? That all's going to make a huge difference. And if he's the first player taken off the board and Chicago trades that pick away or decides to keep Justin Fields, there's a lot of intrigue going around the quarterbacks, just how big they are. I think Anthony Richardson, his hype is going to continue to build after he shows off his athletic ability at the Combine.
Well, he'd be the kind of guy that really has a great combine.
You would think so, yeah. If he can be decent to above average throwing the ball, like everything else is going to just pop like crazy with him.
And then with Levis, athletic ability is one of his strong suits as well. Mm-hmm. So just showing that. Even Stroud, that's kind of one of the questions around him. Everyone thinks it's there, but he doesn't use it as much as he could. If he goes out there and his numbers, athletic testing numbers, look similar to Richardson or Levis, maybe that kind of shrinks the gap in that area to some scouts.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Stroud a lot because everyone's talking about all these other guys because you got the crazy potential of Levis and Richardson. Bryce Young's kind of the quote-unquote consensus or close to a consensus number one. Stroud's the guy that's kind of fading into the background, but he could certainly be considered as he still is considered a top 4, top 5 pick. So if you're just steady Eddie and you still have a lot of potential being a number 1, a top 5 pick, you could still have a heck of a career for yourself, even though no one's really talking about you that much. What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means that together, we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. Need new windows? Contact your hometown team today. Hometown Window and Doors are Central Indiana's premier, locally owned, full-service Anderson window dealer with master installers. From design to installation, the Hometown team handles it all. They carry unlimited options with competitive pricing. Call them direct to get 25% off your windows if you call within the next 60 days. Hometown Windows and Doors gives you all the perks of a national brand with a hometown feel. Visit them at hometownwindowteam.com today. The Colts' offensive line last year was not good. And that's the nicest way you could say it. We're not always nice, so we'll probably say some harsher things than that. But some true things. It's a line that has steadily declined over the past couple years, as Chap kind of pointed at, as I pointed at earlier. So I think the first thing to get off my chest is, if you view this as a one-year problem, you haven't been watching the Indianapolis Colts. This is a several-year problem. And even at the beginning of the 2020 season, there were issues with protecting Phillip Rivers. They changed things up to be a much more quick-tempo throwing offense, which fit him perfectly. And let me say, the offensive line did get better in the second half of that 2020 season. But that's a blip on the radar to me right there, is when there were some problems that you saw from this line that in 2018, 2019 really was one of the better units in the NFL. So 2020, that happens. 2021, they were the third worst pass-blocking offensive line in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Third worst, ranked 30th in the NFL out of 32 teams, pass-blocking. Eric Fisher, big part of that at left tackle. If you don't have a left tackle, you don't have an offensive line. But he was not alone in his problems. Other guys had problems. They were a much better run-blocking team than they were a pass-blocking team. And that's why Jonathan Taylor had such a great season. They weren't a perfect run-blocking team, but I know that they were graded out and considered very highly by the coaching staff, by Frank Reich and his staff. And we talked about him with this year, with how that level just went from a really high run-blocking level to a very, very subpar blocking level. That your guys who were elite weren't elite or were not here anymore. The guys that were steady to good were steady to poor, somewhere in that range. Like, just everyone took a step back. So,
and Quentin made the Pro Bowl.
And somehow Quentin Nelson made the Pro Bowl, and we'll talk about that. But I think that's important, guys, to note, is that this is not just a one-year issue. Certainly, this issue was amplified this year. But this is something that has not just been, maybe 2022 was just an aberration, and you can kind of write it away as growing pains for some reason. But there have been problems with this unit over the past couple years, from what I've seen.
Let's just call it post-AC.
Yep.
Post-Costanzo.
Yep.
Because like you said, if you can hide a weakness at left guard or right guard, you cannot hide weakness at left tackle. Can't do it. It just almost paralyzes your offense. You're keeping people into double team or to chip, and it just kind of impedes your offense. And they've made two back-to-back decisions at left tackle that have blown up in their face. It just has. They hoped, invested, and crossed their fingers that Eric Fisher would come back from the Achilles, which he did, probably too soon. But he never got back to where he was. Good run blocker, I think, at least for the second half of the season. Always a liability in pass protection. And then this year they go into the season and they decide that Matt Pryor is our guy with one career start at left tackle. He basically was a very serviceable journeyman who you could plug in wherever you needed. But to think he can just get the left tackle spot and we'll be okay, they were wrong. And then they go to Bernhard Raimann, who might be okay. We don't know, but early on he wasn't okay. He was actually worse than Pryor was.
It was a penalty or a sack for
the Denver game will be. He's probably got a video of that to just remind him how bad it can get, because that was bad. But I thought the last half of the year you thought, maybe this guy with another year, this is a guy that's still growing into the position, that maybe he can be the guy. And if he is, the line's got a chance. You can do something at right guard. I wouldn't be opposed, but Matt Pryor at right guard. But you can deal with right guard, but left tackle, if you haven't got a reliable left tackle, you're struggling from the get-go.
Yeah, let's talk left tackle then first, because that is Bernhard Raimann, who he will be 26 years old in September, which is pretty old for a second-year player in the NFL. But at the end of the day, his grade for last year, according to Pro Football Focus, was a 73, and that's respectable, Joe, on the level of offensive linemen, especially. Like, if you get above 70, like you're a starter in the NFL. You're going to get paid like a starter in the NFL. So we'll kind of explain some of these numbers as we go along, but Raimann took what was a very, very, very slow start and it improved as the season went on.
He was benched at one point.
He was benched at one point, and then the new coaching staff comes in, or the new coach, and Jeff Saturday, and Raimann's all of a sudden back at left tackle because Dennis Kelly did nothing to totally win that job either. His grade, as we can touch it, was less than 60 for last year. But Raimann's probably going to be the starter next year, even if you bring in a more reliable veteran backup or somebody who could be more of a swing tackle. Raimann seems like, Joe, with the way he ended last year, is going to be the left tackle for now for the Colts.
Yeah, from week 9 on, Pro Football Focus's 21st highest graded in pass blocking. So he really got going as the season went on. And I get, the Colts are built to be a running team with Taylor and all they're paying their offensive line. But my left tackle, just make sure he can protect the quarterback, and we'll deal with whatever he can do in the running game. I think you go into the season hoping Raimann can really step into that role, but you got to bring someone in to push him. The Colts, other than drafting Raimann, who clearly was not ready, did not bring in anyone to push Matt Pryor at left tackle last year, and we saw how that happened. You got to bring in a swing tackle to either push Raimann, or if Raimann shows that he's not that guy who can be serviceable on the blind side for whatever rookie quarterback is back there.
And he's got 3 more years on his contract, being a third-round pick a year ago, making about $1.5 million right now.
That's another reason you hope he's the guy.
Yeah. Exactly. You can have him for 3 years and $1.5 million instead of $20 million, which is what a starting left tackle in this league is going to make from year to year. So you hopefully worry about that when it comes in 3 years. That's a problem that you want to have down the road, But right now, you hope you can take advantage of this. Braden Smith, the other side, he'll be 27 years old in March, so he's just 1 year older than Bernhard Raimann, even though he's been here in Indianapolis since 2018. He had 16 starts last year, also allowed 7 sacks. His grade for the entire year, 75.5, so a little bit better than Raimann overall. And I put down his grades from a bunch of the previous years, and it's right along with what he's done throughout his career. His rookie year, he graded out 73. Then in the next year, 2019, a 79.8. Then the last 2 years, 2020, 2021, he was at an 80, which is very solid, very solid tackle. And that's why he got a contract that he did. Starting right tackle contract money, 3 more years to that contract, averaging almost $19 million a year. And this year, a tick down there a little bit at 75.5, which really part of it was accounting for the slow start to the season, which he got better at later. For sure, it was, because it's obviously for an entire year. But out of everyone on the offensive line last year, Braden Smith probably had the best year out of anybody start to finish. I know the bar isn't that high, chap, but Braden Smith was the guy who at least this offseason will have the least amount of people clamoring to get him out. Some people would be like, trade Quentin Nelson away for a quarterback. We don't care after last year. Trade Ryan Kelly away if you can get a quarterback or a better draft pick. Braden Smith may be the one that's least in that conversation because he had the best year out of everyone who played.
Yeah, and again, he was – I was just looking at this, that they had 7 different starting combinations, 7 or 8 last year because of performance. I mean, Braden Smith missed 1 game. Kelly and Nelson didn't miss a game. It's so unusual to change, not because of injury. So, like you said, I think Braden Smith. I expect Braden Smith to come back and play well. I expect Quentin to come back and play well. Ryan Kelly, we'll get to him. I don't know. I don't know. He's pretty expensive. So, whenever people start wanting to get rid of people, Kelly or trade Jonathan Taylor or Michael Pittman, I just keep going back. I default to the fact you're bringing in a young quarterback, and you can't cut into a supporting cast too much. I'd rather you cut into the defense and keep the offense firm. Add another strong receiver and like you guys said, a swing tackle, hoping he's your swing tackle, but if he's not, he can be your left tackle. So work to do. I like the three guys coming back. I like the two guys coming back, Smith and Bernard. Ryan Kelly, I just don't know. In right guard, you're gonna find a guy to play right guard, but the other four spots you've got to be spot on with. And if you get Ryan Kelly, Danny Pinner. So so we'll go through all these, but
yeah.
It's not easy. It's easy to say get rid of this guy. It's always tougher to replace him.
Yeah, let's talk all the starters first, and then we'll really get into the backups here. I think that's a good way to discuss it. But Quentin Nelson last year, his in 17 starts, he allowed 5 sacks, which, according to Pro Football Focus, is more than he had these previous 4 seasons combined. He had 4 sacks allowed the previous 4 seasons combined.
How many highlights were there? And you can probably do this with a lot of players, but when he was just pushed back, pushed down, and
run over,
and that's just not like what he's been. So, last year he fought injuries. This year, I don't know if he fought trying to help the left tackle or what, but that was not Quentin Nelson. They need him to play like they're paying him, and if he struggles again, then this line's really going to have trouble.
Mm-hmm. You're cooked if you're paying a guard $22 million a year, and he's playing like a guard who should make $1.5 million a year. You're absolutely cooked because you're just eating a bunch of your salary cap in an area that nobody really puts your cap in that area. The value is not as high. It's more valuable to pay a skill position player some of this money because they can make a greater impact on the game. Quentin's grade this past year, 2022, was a 68.4. So he's the lowest that we've talked about so far, lower than both tackles. The year before, in 2021, he was graded only a 69.1. And as Chap alluded to, he was battling injuries last year. This year he was not, and he graded out a little bit worse. And this also goes to my point that if you think that this is a one-year problem, this is not a one-year problem. There's been some regression with Quentin Nelson. Last year we thought, maybe it's just the injuries. Well, what's going on this year then? There's been stepping back of the product we have seen on the field. And I can't sit here and tell you I know everything that's gone on off the field to make this happen, but I can tell you what's happening on the field. And it hasn't been good. It hasn't been what is expected, I should say. Because before that with Quentin Nelson, he was grading out 86, 91, and then his rookie year was right around an 80, a 79.7. So he's had back-to-back years in the 60s now, which is unfathomable for the start that he had to his career. And yet he somehow made the Pro Bowl this year again, like we say.
I think what's needed, and they're going to get it, is a new set of eyes from the head coach, from the coordinator, and from the offensive line coach. They're coming in here with a clean slate. They have no preconceived notions of who these guys are, and they don't care if Quentin's been a 4-time first-team All-Pro. They're going to be coming here and just say, let's look at the tape, and this is what we've got. And last year wasn't any good, wasn't very good. So I'm not saying they're going to, again, you just can't make massive changes.
Right.
The roster doesn't allow it, the cap doesn't allow it, and the available talent on the market doesn't allow it. But I think it's a good thing to have a new set of eyes on this group, maybe more than any, to say this is what we perceive was wrong, and this is how we think we're going to fix it.
Yeah, Joe, I think Chap makes a great point about how a new set of eyes can be helpful. A coaching staff that doesn't care who you are, for lack of a better way to put it. Exactly. I didn't draft you. You can stay. You can go for all I care. But with Quentin, I know the talent he has. If he is healthy, I think that he could still be one of the better guards or the best guard, right along there with.
You just wish he was a left
Zach
tackle.
Martin, exactly, in the NFL. But
yeah, they're paying him to be one of the best linemen, not just a guard.
Exactly.
Because he was supposed to have that kind of impact, and partially because he helped reset the identity of the offensive line. The offensive line was a problem in Indianapolis for a long time. It got Andrew Luck to retire, pretty much. And then they draft Quentin Nelson, and all of a sudden it starts coming better. He comes in as the ass kicker type who, is going to intimidate the defense. You try and run a strong stunt on Quentin Nelson and ask Melvin Ingram how that happened, how that turned out in L.A. against the Chargers. But that's just been missing the past 2 years, and especially this year, where he, like you say, he ended up on his butt more than I've ever remembered seeing Quentin Nelson end up on his butt. I know he had back issues 2 years ago. Are they lingering? Has that kind of zapped some of his strength? I know the back can be a very tricky thing. So I don't have an answer for why the regression has happened. Hopefully this new coaching staff can get in there, motivate these guys, and help figure it out, because Quentin Nelson not playing up to his contract is going to hold this team back.
And if you're talking about the guy who is supposed to set the tone for the culture of this team, you go back to Kayvon Thibodeau doing snow angels.
I was just going to say,
yep.
You want to talk about changing the culture. 2 or 3 years ago, I can't imagine anyone on this offensive line allowing that to happen. Quentin might have gotten thrown out of a game.
And I might have been okay with that.
And I would have been okay with it.
Yeah, what was there to lose against the Giants? The season was over. They were already losing.
It spoke volumes that nobody. It reminded me of several years ago with Matt Hasselbeck, and he just got punished on the Pittsburgh sideline, and nobody came to his defense. And you just can't have that. You just, again, step up, and whether you think Nick Foles is a great quarterback, doesn't matter. He's your teammate. And that nobody, even receivers, I mean, no one, but the offensive line, that's their guy. And the fact that no one did anything, I know that's happened so long ago, but that spoke volumes about where this offensive line was.
Out of all the meetings that I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for, that one might be at the top. Might be. Like, I'd love to be in the meeting with Jim Irsay, Chris Ballard, Frank Reich when Jim Irsay said Carson Wentz is gone. I would love to be in the meeting with Chris Strasser, what's his name, Jeff Saturday, and the entire offensive line when he just, I have to imagine, lit them up and ripped into them.
And whatever he said wasn't strong enough.
Exactly.
They deserved everything they got and more.
Yep. So the other starting guard last year, Will Fries, will be 25 years old in April this year. Started 9 games, was active for all 16, just a second-year player, a 7th round, I think, pick 2 years ago out of Penn State. So starting in your second year as a 7th round pick is not overly common. His PFF, Pro Football Focus grade, was just 58.4, which is honestly what I kind of expect for a guy in his second year who's a 7th round pick, which is a below average grade there.
If I remember right, he played tackle at Penn State.
I think he did. Yeah, exactly. So he's also transitioning to a guard role, which is completely different. So he has 2 years left on his contract, about $1 million per year average. That's neither here nor there, really. But
I want to go into next year with Will Fries as my backup guard. That's what I would feel good about. A backup who has some starting experience, and he was okay for stretches during the season. There were parts where he wasn't. I think he started, was benched, and then they ended up going back to him. That happened a lot last year.
It did.
But they need to find someone else to come in and feel better about right guard, because whoever you get quarterback, especially if they end up going with Stroud, who's the pocket passer of this crop of QBs, you need to be able to protect him.
There were significant problems last year, and we talked with Ryan Kelly multiple times about communication there. And I don't think there was problems with more with communication than with Ryan Kelly and Will Fries and that area right there on the offensive line, because it just seemed like that was always where teams were really like just throwing whatever the Colts were planning into chaos, whether it was Matt Judon multiple times running stunts, because that game is just burned into my memory because I was there in New England for that debacle.
9 sacks?
I lost count, so you're probably right. I don't think it was double
60
digits.
sacks.
Yeah.
Franchise record 62.
Woo.
Come on.
Hey. Yeah. Yay, guys. Good job. Center Ryan Kelly will be 30 years old in May. Started all 17 games last year. He's been the starter if he's been healthy since he was drafted by the Colts. His grade last year was not good either. It was a 64.3, which was actually better than his grade in 2021, which was only a 56.9, which again brings me back to the fact that this has not been a one-year problem. And in spite of the differences between pass blocking and run blocking and how they were better run blockers than they were pass blockers a year ago, there were significant problems with this offensive line that last beyond 1 year. Ryan Kelly's also had Pro Football Focus grades, if you go back to 2020, of 69, which is pretty good, 73 in 2019, 74 his rookie year. So he's been, unfortunately, on a steady downswing, has been Ryan Kelly. And he got injured his rookie year, near the end of his rookie year. And there have been just neck, shoulder has cropped up here and there with him from time to time.
A little knee here and there.
Yeah, from year to year. And it's at the point where it is something that is a continual issue with Ryan Kelly, is his health. And it's unfortunate because I still do really like Ryan Kelly because he's easy to talk to in the fact that he will be honest with you as much as he wants to be. Yeah, and accountable with you when you get him in the locker room post game, and professional with you in the locker room post game. But Chap, you said earlier, you made the point earlier that he's making a lot of money right now, and if the Colts want to save some money, like if they want to save real money for some reason, and you're looking at guys to cut, and you're looking at guys who have not lived up to what they're being paid, Ryan Kelly might be one guy that is considered.
You always look at the cap in guys that, okay, right now they're like $13 million under the cap, but they can create so much if they want to with Matt Ryan. You're going to save 17. Nick Foles, you're going to save probably only like $1.5 million. But then you look elsewhere, and it's Ryan Kelly. You're going to save what, Joe's about $8 million, 7.8, which is fine. It really is. But I keep coming back to what I always default to. Then what's your plan B?
What's next?
What's next? Again, it's easy to cut guys. It's just easy. Just cut them all and start over. But you know, the back of it is Danny Pinter. We all kind of think he's more accustomed to being a center than he is a guard. Are you ready to go into next year with a young quarterback as Danny Pinter as your center, or do you think you can get one on the market? The guys are on the market for a reason, because Ryan Kelly would be on the market for a reason. He might be the most interesting discussion they have before they have to do anything, is what to do with Ryan Kelly, if anything.
I think he comes back again. If you're going to have a rookie quarterback, I think you want the guys in front of him who have been here a little bit longer, who have been Pro Bowlers, and you hope that the new coaching staff can come in, like you've said, Chap, and kind of and tweak this thing to make it better. I don't know if it's going to be what it was ever again, not with this unit.
It doesn't have to be.
Exactly. It just needs to be not what it was last year. So
what a low bar that is.
Yeah, it really is. Joe, you've put together a couple numbers here about what could happen if he's released with the salary cap, and like Ryan Kelly is one of the guys who's higher paid on this team, but still, even if you cut him, it's not like you're saving $10 million in the salary cap right now. It's much less than that.
So this is why I think he might be back. Is you cut him pre-June, you could save. So you're going to have $4.5 million in dead cap if you cut him before June. That's all this year. If you cut them after June, you get to split it between this year and the 2024 season. But that doesn't do you much good, because by June, like the free agency period's basically done by then. What are you going to spend that $10 million on? So it basically have to be pre-June release. So you're already sinking $4.5 million into them. And then if you go out and sign somebody, you know, not even like a superstar center, not that there are any out there this year, but maybe someone decent like Ethan Posich. I don't know, of the Browns. He was PFF's third highest graded center this last year. He was with the Browns on a $1 million 1-year contract last year. Maybe he gets $6 million this year. So that's $6 million plus the $4.5 million of dead cap, and you're basically back to what you're already paying Ryan Kelly. So if you think you can get a significant upgrade at center in free agency and pay basically the same amount, go for it. But like Mike said, you got to play someone at center. I don't think anyone feel great about Danny Pinter after how he played last year. So yeah, for at least continuity's sake, it does make some sense in that regard to keep Ryan Kelly.
Need new windows? Let the Hometown team help. Hometown Windows and Doors is Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer with master installers. From design to installation, we handle it all, carrying nationally known brands like Anderson with more options and competitive pricing. Call us direct and get 25% off your windows if you buy within the next 60 days.
Please contact your Hometown team today. We are Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer.
National brand, hometown feel.
The story of Hancock Health is all about you and everything you need to live your healthiest life. Like Hancock Regional, one of the nation's safest hospitals, and an independent health network with over 70 doctors at more than 30 locations around East Central Indiana. We're growing and evolving to help further your story. And we're just getting started. See all the ways Hancock Health and you can work together to make health possible at hancockhealth.org.
Let's get to the backups then for the Colts, because those are all the starters. We've gone through them. Matt Pryor is perhaps one of the more intriguing names because as bad as he was at tackle last year, and really even when they moved him back inside to guard, his Pro Football Focus grade was 44.9.
He was benched at 3 spots. He played 3 different spots.
That's hard to do. To get benched at 3 different spots, but he was also shuffled around because the Colts had no idea what they were doing. So to his credit, right there, like I don't want to put everything on him here.
They put 3 or 4 or 5 people in positions to fail.
Yep,
including Jeff Saturday.
Yep.
But Matt Pryor, they the entire offseason, they tried to make him into a left tackle, changing his body type, changing his technique, and I think he went through boxing training to try to make him into what he wasn't. And so then when that didn't work, they put him back to guard or right tackle, and he wasn't prepared for that.
It's all messed up after that.
Correct.
After you've been trading all offseason for something different. So
again, where you're going, I would not be opposed to bringing him back because it's not going to cost much, and let him be that movable part because he can play 3 or 4 spots
if you train like that. So if you get back to what he was like last year, the previous year, he had a Pro Football Focus grade in 2021 of 76.5 for crying out loud. And that's why the Colts wanted to try him at left tackle. Like, you know what? He can change his body type a little bit. We can try to train him. So I don't want to completely rip on the Colts for trying to make him a left tackle right now. What they deserve criticism for is not having any backup option, and then just also really not having many backup options inside, and so throwing him over there. So like you said, he was in a position, he was thrown in a position where failure was much more likely than not. And that's part of what coaching and front office work in the NFL is limiting your options for failure. Is if this doesn't work, have some type of a backup plan. And with the offensive line, with Matt Pryor in particular, there wasn't a quality backup plan. He allowed 6 sacks last year, by the way, in 9 starts, which for a ratio is not good. You go over an entire season, that's like 10, 11 sacks in a season.
I guess my only thing is I get it. He trained all offseason to be the left tackle, and I get why he failed at left tackle because most players fail at left tackle. There's only a few good ones in the NFL. There aren't 32. But I guess I don't understand completely why he struggled so poorly at going back to guard or right tackle where he had played pretty well the year before. It's not like the scheme changed. It's not like he forgot how to do it all of a sudden because he spent one off season training at left tackle. Mm-hmm. I get it. You might be a little rusty. You might be, different pass sets.
Was
and
his
things
confidence
like that.
shot?
Maybe his confidence was shot. But I just don't understand how all of a sudden he forgot how to do, bring him back to be that movable piece. They needed that movable piece from him last year, and he apparently forgot how to do it. Now the entire offensive line struggled. I think it was a systemic problem with the Indianapolis Colts, and that's why they have a new coaching staff coming in.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, but a couple other offensive tackles there that are on the roster. Jordan Murray and someone who sounds like he's more of a lord of Victorian-era England, Arlington Hambright, have been signed to reserve and future contracts with the squad as well. So here's the deal with Jordan Murray. Like, I go into the locker room, I see him, and he stands out because he's a big dude. He is a large human being. But very much a project working on, as is Hambright, to be signed to a reserve future contract right now. Backup guard, you go to Dakota Shepley right now, is the only one really on the roster. And he's also a center, by the way. Claimed off of waivers in January from the Dallas Cowboys. Was active for 4 games, but did not start at all. Has never started in his career. So there's your backup guard right now. As Chap said, you might want to improve on that this offseason sometime, or maybe even have a starter and have Will Fries as your backup. At center, you have Danny Pinter there, who's a backup. His Pro Football Focus grade in 2022 was also dreadful, very similar to Matt Pryor. Pryor was, 44.9, and Pinter was 44.7. Which is such a disappointment for him after finishing, again, 2021 very strong, being a backup, coming in when Ryan Kelly was out. He graded out in 2021 as a 74.7, and he was one of the first to go this year when things were not working out at right guard for him. Only made 3 starts, and so he only has 1 year left on his contract. His 1 year, $1 million left from his rookie deal. The Ball State product, Chirp Chirp, needs a better 2023 if he wants to stick around with this Colts team any longer, Chap.
Yeah, because they threw him in there. Because keep in mind, 2 guys that we haven't mentioned, Mark Lewinsky and Chris Reed, were 2 major losses to free agency. They were never going to bring them both back, but I had hoped they could bring one back. But they didn't for obvious reasons, and those 2 guys were major losses. And then for the running game, Jack Doyle, but that's another podcast. So I go back to 4 or 5 years ago when Chris Ballard was talking about building the offensive line. He said, ideally, you want to go into the training camp or into the season. You normally carry 9 or 10. You want to have like 8 guys who you consider starter quality. In the last couple of years, that's not been the case.
The problem is every NFL team wants that, right, and there's just not that many guys out there.
But you certainly need better depth, everybody has depth, everybody has numbers, reliable depth than what the Colts have had the last couple of years, because as we saw when things didn't work, there was no backup plan that was feasible or that worked.
Yeah, well, they took 2021's reliable depth and said, you guys are starters now, and then didn't do anything to replace those depth pieces. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got to where we are.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that was about it.
I was just going to say Wesley French as well is on the roster right now as a center. He was a practice squad member last year, has 2 years left on his contract.
The French family appreciates you getting that in there.
No problem. If French fries can be the backup offensive line for the Colts, that's not the worst thing in the world. But I don't want to see them starting anytime soon.
What about if they brought in your guy from the Eagles, Isaac? Help me out with
Seumalo.
Seumalo.
Yes, Isaac. Probably the pinnacle. The pinnacle interior or guard on the free agent market this offseason. Had a Pro Football Focus grade of 75. Had a 90-plus pass block grade from Week 11 on last year. Really finished strong with the Eagles. Hey, if he and Shane Steichen are boys, get him over here and put him on that line.
You always look for those connections.
Exactly.
Because there's going to be 3 or 4 players that he knows and likes and trusts. So
we should go down. We should have a podcast where we at least have all the Eagles free agents too, and see exactly who they are.
Like 20 significant.
Yeah, there's
agents.
A bunch of them.
Yeah, they do.
So certainly the Colts won't get all of them, but like you said, if there's 2 or 3 that come and have an impact here, that would be worthwhile to do. We'll put that in the back pocket for a lean week sometime pre-free agency, at least to bring that up. But you got him. You got Nate Davis, who was playing for Tennessee last year, who was a 70+ in his Pro Football Focus grade. But you get further along, and there's guys that have been starters in the league, but are not elite players. That's why people let them go if you get to a certain point. And like Chap has said with the Colts in the past, within the Peyton Manning era, they were just guards that recycled in. That's what a lot of teams decide to do with that position. So if you really want somebody who has some experience and to pop in, who you know is not going to be an elite player, there's some guys out there. But nevertheless, the pickings are lean. At tackle, Orlando Brown for Kansas City is one of the best left tackles in the NFL.
He's not going anywhere.
Exactly, that's the problem. He's staying in Kansas City. They're going to either franchise tag him, or they might franchise tag him and then re-sign him.
If the Colts wanted Orlando Brown, they should have traded with the Ravens when he was available.
Exactly, that was the time to do it, when they had a couple guys that they liked there and then wanted to trade Orlando Brown. Kansas City made the trade. It was a big trade. They gave up a lot to get Orlando Brown. But now they're happy. They've won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that's what gave them the Super Bowl. They've got this guy named Patrick Mahomes, but yeah, Orlando Brown is very happy with how things
and kind of looking at this year, there's a few good tackles available. Mike McGlinchey of the 49ers is another one.
They're mostly right tackles, though.
They're mostly right tackles, and I don't get the sense anyway that the Colts would be in a high-end tackle market. It just seems like paying another premium position along that offensive line isn't something that's in the cards. I am intrigued, however, by some of these swing tackles. Kelvin Beachum from Arizona, he's a guy with a ton of starting experience, 17 starts last season, 147 career starts, has played left and right tackle. And he was Pro Football Focus's 30th highest graded tackle last year, so he's still getting it done at age 33. He's a guy who I could see come in and be that swing tackle for you in case Smith misses games, or if Ryman is struggling again, you can put Beachum over and at least get decent, passable production at left tackle for your rookie quarterback.
Yeah, there's a couple other players. Cameron Fleming, who was with Denver last year, he's played both left and right tackle in his career. George Fant, an offensive tackle for the Jets, has also played both. Had a knee injury last year. He was limited last year. His career year was 2 years ago. Had a very solid, at least pass block grade there. On left tackle was a 75.1. So some other notable tackles. I think there's an interesting name in Andre Dillard, who was the Eagles.
Another Philly guy.
Last year. That's right. If Steichen likes him, like I said, the Eagles were in a unique position that they have Lane Johnson at right tackle, and then they had a prospect left tackle in Jordan Mailata, who was an Australian League football player who developed into a left tackle, and they made it work. And he's there now, and he's their guy at left tackle. So that allowed them at the time to trade Pryor with the Colts, because they still had Dillard there as well, who was a first-round pick in 2019. But now Dillard's another name that could come up if they want to go elsewhere in the backup tackle market themselves. So that could be one connection there. Andrew Wiley from Kansas City was their starting right guard a year ago. He's played right guard and tackle. Right tackle and guard rather. So if you want to really invest in guard. But again, like we get to this point, and Chap, you made it earlier, the Colts already had the highest paid offensive line last year. If they're going to do that again this year, okay, but obviously just throwing money at the problem doesn't work. You need the right pieces that fit. You need guys that can communicate better, a lot more so than they did last year. And hopefully you get some eyes on it from this new coaching staff that can put the right pieces in the right positions and make significant improvements than what we have seen, not just from last year, but from the past several years.
Yeah, the highest paid line basically is the three guys. That's where that's why it's so steep. Again, I can go back to, and you just mentioned it, get a new set of eyes and sort of get a fresh start with these guys. And I guess early on you have to decide is, Can we resuscitate this group with, and it's got to start with those three guys and Bernard Ryman. Again, I don't want to dismiss right guard, but that's fifth on my list right now as far as the offensive line priorities. So see where these guys think they are with the offensive line, and then see if these guys. I'm with Joe. I don't see how they can budget another $10 or $15 million for a free agent lineman. I just don't see how it works.
Right, and even if, like you said, Joe, if you cut Ryan Kelly, you save some money, but there's still a dead cap hit, and then you want to pay somebody. If you want to pay someone who's good, you're going to eat up all the money that you saved immediately right away. So if you do it for somebody who you think is better, okay. But if you do it for someone who's just an older veteran who might work out, then what's the point?
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, they can go out and sign somebody, but it has to be the right guy. I mean, we've seen Chris Ballard strike out continuously on these tackles. One example, last year, looking at Dennis Kelly, he signed for the same amount of money as Cameron Fleming did with Denver, $1.2 million. Kelly had, 58 PFF grade?
Yep.
Fleming had 72, 29th highest graded tackle in the league. So they've got to get the right guys in there, not just a guy, but someone who can come in and produce. Hopefully new coaching staff can help with that, because it seemed like last year, no matter who they put in, they were struggling.
And they certainly haven't really devoted many high draft picks if we're looking at the draft. We won't go too deep in the draft, but they haven't devoted many high draft picks toward offensive line since taking Braden Smith and Quentin Nelson back in 2018. It's been Javon Patterson and Jackson Barton in 2019, both seventh-round picks. Danny Pinter in 2020, a 5th-round pick. Will Fries in 2021, a 7th-round pick. And then last year was Bernard Ryman in the 3rd round. They finally did take someone at least a little bit higher on day 2 instead of day 3 in the draft. But it's not like you have this group of guys who have been developing the past couple years that have been like highly sought after guys in the draft that you think can step into one of these positions. They're not there right now. So it's a spot that you think there's got to be some looking outside of what's been in the rooms to solve some of the problems that have been inside the rooms, and you hope that what has gone on inside the rooms can also get better, can improve. Right now, the Colts have a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks right now, but you figure, Chap, once again, who knows what that's going to look like once they make moves that might need to be made near the top of the draft.
Well, you just have to assume that the 1st and 2nd round picks are gone.
To get your quarterback,
right?
To get up to 1 or 2. Yeah.
I can't imagine them going 1, 2, and 3. I wouldn't think they would include
I think
3.
they'd start to dig into next year.
Well, they're going to have to do that anyway.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's why to think they're going to get offensive line help in the draft, it's going to be a 3rd or 4th.
It's going to be a guy like Ryman again, like a guy who's not ready at the beginning of the year.
Who you think, at some point it's got to be pretty good, but not right away. They need guys that when they go into camp, these are the guys that we can go into games with and be ready. So they've got tons of work to do, and a lot of it's on the offensive line.
Undeniably so. The position on the Colts that was, if you looked at it 3 years ago, you loved where they were. Absolutely loved it. That's kind of highlights how life in the NFL is. It can change
so
like
did
that.
the Colts, and then they just kind of ignored it for the next several seasons, and here we are. Now they got to come away with this offseason with a starting right guard and a swing tackle.
We appreciate.
They didn't ignore it. They were wrong with their picks.
That's a better way to put it.
They didn't, like Ryan Gregson didn't ignore it. He just had too many wrong picks.
Right.
They didn't ignore left tackle. They were
They've
wrong.
been wrong.
Just pick Fisher instead of Charles Leno.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. It's happened too much. And whoever that
Pay
rookie
instead of
quarterback is.
Darrisaw. Haven't even mentioned that yet this podcast.
I still love Quiddy.
Christian Darrisaw. I think about him far too much.
Yeah, I think about him less just because I do love Quiddy Pay. And
I like Pay.
Yeah, and I think that after last year, I'm much higher on Quiddy Pay than I was before last year. I think
Just stay healthy.
Exactly. When he stays healthy, I think he can really
If
be a
he's
difference
healthy,
maker.
he's a 10-sack guy. He's strong on the run. You need a stud.
Yeah, you
on
just
the
need
other
a stud
side.
left tackle, and you need a stud on the other side, but you also need a stud left tackle. And Joe makes the great
Need
point.
a lot more studs.
Yes, studs, not duds.
Let this be the offseason of the studs.
Yeah.
It could be a T-shirt.
Yes, studs, not duds. Let's do it. And it starts with the Combine that's coming up this next week. Find out who those studs are down at Lucas Oil Stadium.
You guys are going to be speaking with Ballard and Steichen on Wednesday,
that'll
right?
be next
Wednesday
week.
afternoon.
That's the plan. So maybe next Thursday is when we'll drop this next podcast. We'll talk about what some of those leadership in the Colts have to say. And I'm sure they will be so eloquent and loquacious about the quarterbacks in this draft and tell us everything that they're thinking on those top picks.
Drag Irsay down there. He might actually tell you
my
something.
He
goodness.
might actually, yes. That'd be dangerous.
We need to keep him away from the
Can
combine.
you imagine Pete Ward just trying to rip him away from people at the Combine? Like, Jim, this way? No. Or maybe they need to get Tex down there.
Well, they take him down there. He'll say, that Ohio State quarterback looks pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to really stir it up.
Exactly. That'd be great. Or, yeah. And that Georgia quarterback looks really good.
Just every 2 weeks, just have him throw out a new one.
Exactly.
Maybe Ballard will show up with Alabama jersey on.
That'd be great. He might show up with a Kansas jersey because his son. Congrats to Cole Ballard coming to Kansas and playing football there.
play?
The Westfield product. He plays football. He was quarterback for the Shamrocks of Westfield. So, I saw a nice picture of the family there. All of them have their Jayhawk jerseys on. So, Rock Chalk Jayhawk next time we see Chris Ballard, as he will be. Maybe he'll head out to where is Kansas? It is Lawrence, Kansas. That's right. All I can think of is Manhattan. I knew that was Kansas State. So, thank you, Chap, for filling me in. Anyway, plenty more positions on the Colts still to go. Next week will be mainly with Combine and Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. We'll probably have a full coaching staff by then, too. So looking forward to seeing you all next week. Follow all Mike Chappell's work online, fox59.com, cbs4indy.com. You can follow us on Twitter combined at Colts Blue Zone. Mike Chappell is at mchappell51. I'm Dave Griffiths at DaveG_sports. See you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.